Hi, welcome to another edition of City 101. Well, today we're going to be talking about tax capacity, a term you may or may not have heard. It's part of what I call my City 101 Tax Trilogy series. And what I'm trying to do is simply educate people on how to start off with the estimated market value of a person's property to the end product of what the property tax is. And you'll see that if you watch the 3 shows regarding property taxes in City 101, they're not exactly directly related. And, you know, again, it's March right now and tax statements are coming out. I'm sure people will look at their estimated market values, and if the market value statement goes down, they're thinking, great, I'm getting a tax decrease. Not so fast. It doesn't quite work like that. And it may just be that your market value went down, but your taxes went up. And I'm going to try to show you how some of that works. I already have a show, City 101, out on estimated market values and how that's arrived at. So I'd encourage you to watch that show first before you watch this one. But it's not necessary. You'll just have a little bit better understanding how it all works. Well, we have to think about how this process flows. It all starts off with the assessor making an estimated market value of your home, and then there's got to be a system of how that's converted to use as a basis for calculating taxes. And that's what this show is about, tax capacity. The tax capacity of property in Minnesota is the basis by which property taxes are calculated, whether that's the county, the city, the school district, or the miscellaneous taxing jurisdictions. Now, once there's a tax capacity, the next piece of that is that there has to be some kind of a multiplier, and that's called a tax capacity rate. And again, every taxing jurisdiction has its own tax capacity rate. And for example, here in Richfield, there's the 3 main ones would be the city's tax capacity rate, the school, and the county. And of course, there's all the miscellaneous districts. There would be the Housing Redevelopment Authority. There would be the Mosquito Control District. There's all kinds of other districts that go into that. Certainly lesser tax rate amounts. And that multiplier against your tax capacity is what ends up being a property tax. But the first important part is the whole idea of tax capacity. Now, in Minnesota, market value creates tax capacity by a formula determined by the legislature. And that changes from time to time. But right now in Minnesota, it's a fairly simple one. And for Richfield, it's especially fairly uncomplicated because most homes in Richfield have a market value of $500,000 or less. And that's where the formula breaks. So here's how it works. For residential properties in Minnesota, if you have, for value under $500,000, it's 1%. So if you have a $200,000 home, according to your estimated market value, you have $2,000 worth of tax capacity. You know, and that works up to $500,000. When you get over $500,000, then you have to have a 2-part calculation. The first $500,000 is at 1%, and the value over $500,000 is at 1.25%. So even if your home value is over $500,000, it's pretty easy for all of us to make that calculation. It's different for commercial property. For commercial property, the first $150,000 is at 1.5%, and then everything after that is at 2%. So when you think about the overall tax capacity of a community, you can see pretty quickly that the more commercial industrial property you have, because it converts to a much higher tax capacity than residential, really creates a much larger tax base for a community to generate the revenue it needs. So in Richfield, for example, we have a total tax capacity of $26,886,939. How does that compare to our neighbors? Well, Edina is $104,913,703, and Bloomington is $107,614,682. So we have about 1/4 of the total tax capacity that those cities have. And again, when you start looking at the whole concept of tax capacity and the idea of well, wait a second, if my estimated market value went down, why won't my taxes go down? Well, unless you have the third piece to this and how we do the tax rates, you won't quite understand it, but let me just put this thought out for you. If your property, residential property went down, that means your neighbors probably went down too. And if residential property goes down, there's a possibility that commercial property went down. And when all those properties in aggregate go down, then the tax capacity for a community shrinks. And that means if you had even the same tax rates as the year before, you'd have to you would have to raise those rates to generate the exact same amount of revenue from the previous year because your base shrunk. And so you were just part of the shrinking base, but they had to use a higher multiplier. Now I know that's all very complicated and I don't expect you to understand it until you see the whole three-part series, and I hope after that you do. But the important part to realize right now is that the tax capacity is really the important middle cog of how property taxes are calculated in Minnesota. And for you to understand, first of all, what your market value means in relationship to your tax capacity, that's half the solution of figuring out how property taxes are calculated. So again, it's an issue of, it's 1% of your market value under $500,000 and then 1.25% over that. And you should have a pretty good idea of what your tax capacity is for your property. Well, I'm going to stop right there because if I go much further in this, it's going to get probably pretty complicated. Maybe you made some notes, maybe you didn't. Maybe you want to watch it again. But wait for part 3 when we talk about our tax capacity rates and those multipliers, and you'll be able to see how you can take any value of, especially of residential real estate, convert it from an estimated market value to a likely property tax. Hope I haven't bored you. So give it some thought, give it some consideration, and until I see you next time on City 101, take care.